Welcome back. Another episode of Tokin with Tim. He's thinking about making his own YouTube channel. And he's just got some thoughts about it. The old YouTube versus the new YouTube and some other things that he's observed. So, take it away, Tim.
All right, well, thank you. I hate the new YouTube. I think it's ridiculous. It sucks. It's all just for propaganda, in my opinion, and to alter your mood, alter your perception of what's going on. Versus back in the day, it felt completely random, especially in the recommended section. I would get all kinds of crazy random stuff in there, and that's what I loved about YouTube. And now it's gone. Now I can hardly watch it almost because of all the propaganda videos. You know, it trying to alter your mood. Or maybe not even propaganda videos. Maybe it's more like an algorithm designed to just give you exactly what it thinks you want to watch rather than random things. And I hate being put into, you know, that sort of bubble or echo chamber. I love the randomness. Plus, I get tired of it. The algorithm, for me, feels like it's pushing you towards political stuff always, rather than, you know, historical things, random things. You know, I look up machining videos all the time, but I rarely get any in recommended. It just drives me nuts. It almost hurts my head. But that's what I love about BitChute, right? Because when you get on BitChute, there's all kinds of random stuff that comes that's on there that you can sift through. Now, given it takes a lot more time because there's a lot of crap and junk there, but at least it's a broad selection where you can get those little gems that come out that aren't necessarily always politically motivated or used to push on your brain. But the whole thing is just frustrating to me. I feel like we're all being pushed down sort of an authoritarian road, or trying to mold our thinking. It frustrates me. I wish we could have big tech companies and big things like this that weren't there to alter the way you think and behave, but rather more open and just let us all grow and think naturally, you know, more organic. But, you know, if it were organic in a sense, I think it would be less military industrial complex, in my opinion, or less going along with the state. But here we are. You know, for example, the second Iraq war, you know, what's George Bush Jr., you know, we've discussed this. What if we took all the money we spent on that war and did it, just used it for improvement in the United States, or even just programs without corruption to improve other people's lives in, you know, destitute countries. But instead we used it on war. You know, it was a total waste. It could have been a fantastic investment. And out of that, too, you know, comes more control over us, more loss of freedoms.
Sure. I always think it's interesting how when people think of government, they think and this isn't true everybody, but you say close to half the population, they think if a government program is here to help people, well, that's socialist or communist. But if it's a military program to destroy other things, then that's American and freedom.
Right, exactly. And I'm not necessarily anti-defense or anti-military in a way, but I think it's gotten to a little bit out of control. I mean, we're past defense to empire, and, you know, empire is really unhealthy for everyone, and we need to come back to just defense. But, you know, empire makes people billions of dollars. Maybe it's what needs to happen. I don't know, you know.
Everything comes back to profit, it seems like.
Yeah, exactly.
Profit and power.
Yes, and it drives me nuts. I mean, this planet is amazing, and it's beautiful, and we need to just take care of it better. And unfortunately, we're not. But then again, you know, once again, you know, if you're an alien looking down, maybe this is some sort of self-correcting mechanism that, you know, we're too much in the environment, or we're destroying the environment, so we war each other to, you know, reduce the population and kind of keep in balance with the environment. And we see it as political things and strive for freedom of speech and freedoms, but on a larger level, maybe it's just built-in population control.
Sure.
But, you know, who knows? I mean, when you look at ants, whatever ants do, we perceive anything they do as natural, even though some of the things they might be doing in their own minds, not to project onto ants' human mind, but some things they are doing, they seem as unnatural. What is it? Don't they some use aphids and haul aphids around to eat leaves, and then the excretion from the aphids are what ants harvest?
Sure.
It's same with us. If we take a more macro view, maybe war and death and destruction is population control. But as an individual, me sitting here in my car on this gorgeous day, I wouldn't want it to come to my land or my people. It's kind of a weird dichotomy. That's where this is the really beautiful hike out there.
Yeah, it's a lot of beautiful country out here.
Yeah, and so I'm just disappointed in YouTube. I'd love to set up a YouTube channel, but we'll see. There's so much work involved in just protecting yourself. I guess maybe the double verification, maybe that's not too much work, but we'll see. I'll just have to plug on through. I get distracted by other things other than working on the computer and research.
The double verification seems to work, and
Right.
It isn't too much work. You just got to be able to receive the text message and punch in the text code.
Yeah, you got to just do it. Nowadays, you have to. You'll make enemies online for no reason. And definitely, I feel like my comments get shadow banned on my YouTube channel.
I'm sure they do. You make good comments, they shadow ban you.
Yeah. I've heard other people say that too. Have you seen where they change comments in real time? Like people will put out a comment and then certain words and phrases are deleted and they come back, instantly come back. It's definitely scary times. I feel like the tech companies definitely have a monopoly. And I don't know what we're going to do as a people to overthrow this monopoly or what we can do. I mean, you'll seem like a crazy person most times if you talk to people, say don't use Twitter, don't use Facebook, be wary of what's on YouTube. They don't give your DNA to any tech company. They'll think you're crazy.
Have you seen this new, it's not a new show, but they have a new season of American Horror Story?
No, I haven't seen the new season. No, I remember when it first came out. I think I watched the first couple seasons when it was new. Isn't it kind of weird? It's like a Twilight Zone almost.
So I can't tell you a lot about it. Somebody told me to check it out, and I've only seen the first about 30 minutes of the first episode. But it's like an apocalypse. Nuclear bombs are raining down and wiping out entire cities across the world.
Yeah,
it's Armageddon. That's the latest season's about, is Armageddon. And what happens about midway through the first episode, it cuts to this family, and they're at home while this is going on. The government shows up at the house and busts in and takes one of the children from the family, and they explain that he has a special set of genetics that they were able to figure out because he sent in for a DNA test. And I thought, that's interesting. We've been talking about that. Like, what are they actually doing with these DNA profiles that everybody's given to these big companies?
Well, it is the rumor, whether it's true or not. The sort of the next evolution of warfare is genetic weapons. I don't know if that's true. I just feel maybe it's even just greed on big companies. They'll figure out something in all of our DNA that they can patent and which we'll have to pay for somewhere down the line. And most of us aren't going to feel the repercussions of that now, but down the line, our children or our children's children will have to pay for something. It's slowly but surely creating more indentured servitude is the right word, but just sort of trap you in the matrix where you won't be able to get out no matter what, no matter how clever you are or what free area you think you're going to find.
We're pretty close to that already. I mean, we get stamped with the Social Security number. We're tracked for most of our life. I mean, it was going on even before the computers were really here. It just made it easier for them to clamp down.
Truly, and it's just a scary dystopian world. And I hate that we always kind of revert back that in our conversation, and people, I guess, wonder always, what can we do? What can we do? I don't know what we can do.
People have to organize and form a new system that's capable of resisting the government, which it's hard to say. Is that even possible? But
part of what I worry about is great. Okay, I envision doing that too, and figuring out a way to communicate without using phones and all that. Humans can figure that out, but then I feel like stuff like that's been tried historically, and the government always gets in there and always messes it up with insiders.
But that doesn't mean it still can't be done. Just because it hasn't been done yet doesn't mean that the perfect idea hasn't come along.
Yep. No, that's a very good point. I guess it's me getting older, so it almost feels like a young man's job, but I guess it should be all of our job. But I always think, how do you do that organization without getting infiltrated by other people? It's the only way to do that, right, is like cell work. Like it's only 2 or 3 or 4 people in a cell, and then they communicate with other cells, so then no one really knows the extent of what's going on, and so that's how you do it, rather than a group of like 50 people and you don't really know everyone that's in that group, but everyone knows the plan.
Right.
It has to be cell oriented, but it's tough nowadays. I don't know what we're going to do. That I think that's what a lot of people are stuck in too, is that quandary, is like, what we're aware, right? We're like the frog in the boiling pot, right? Everyone's aware now that something's happening, but what do you do? What are we going to do? How do we get organized to do it? I'm just as much guilty as anyone else, because then I start to think of like, God, how can I do that? I got to go to, like, for example, I have work tomorrow, right? So normally I start at
so that's what I mean.
3:30.
It's like we have to all get out of this system that we're trapped in. It's like the land we're looking at over there, it needs to be like a territory for people who agree to a certain code. The job in your community would be like to take care of your land and your community.
Right.
So all your local agriculture's there. You're around a group of people who are on the same page as you. That's essentially like the idea that we get as a country when we're growing up, that we live in this nation and we're all about freedom and fighting for freedom across the world. We all get put in this narrative, but then we grow up and we realize it's a lie. So it's like, it would have to be a smaller, more local community that we realize isn't a lie, so we don't feel like we're sold out by it every single day, where everyone wants to be a part of it and do their part.
So I just go on.
I was just saying, then you wouldn't have to wake up and, drive to your job and be on the grind and get essentially used and abused by somebody else. You just have to be, my job today is to take care of my community, grow the food.
Right. So I just thought of a bumper sticker of like, the Amish were right, or the
Sure.
Amish are right,
Sure.
Maybe they were far ahead of what we realize, They
Keeping
knew.
it simple.
Yeah, keep it simple. They're at a good stage. I mean, I guess I like modern technology, antibiotics and stuff, but I guess there's a trade-off for your freedom, even though I don't, they're in the that's what I was wondering too. If war breaks out, will it just wash over like the Amish, or will it go around?
Well, the Amish have been around longer than the wars.
Yeah, so I wonder, and they're more likely to survive versus
anyone
else.
They're better suited for the Fallout world than anybody else.
Right. Wow. I gotta go check out some Amish. I guess the nearer communities that are similar are called, like, what are they called? Like Hatterites. They live near my sister in Montana. The best pork you'll ever get. Amazingly over the top, insane good pork. Heritage breeds. They're very good. Well, I mean, dude, I don't know. I try to do my best, and not that it really matters too much, but just try to produce as much of my own food as possible. Don't acquire any debt. Try to save for what you want and then just pay for it, and then try not to be so consumer driven. Like, I like the notion of always thinking of, how can I figure out to do what I need to get done, or fix what I need to fix without spending any money? How can I figure this out without doing that? That's not to say that I haven't saved up, and I could just spend money to solve problems, but then over time you lose your freedom, because then you don't have options of work. You don't have options because you have to go to work. You have to do these things. And I also understand too, it's harder to raise families, right? Everything is more expensive. It's crazy nowadays with kids going to school, what they may or may not be taught. Mom and dad have to work a lot. It's just troubling times.
Yeah.
Hopefully though, what is it, for every action there's an opposite and equal reaction. So hopefully the overtones appear malevolent, but maybe there's undertones that we're not aware of that are good, that are equally of rising,
Well, it's making people advance themselves who are awake.
Yeah, and I would have to agree. It does feel like a greater level sort of a consciousness is rising in the populace in some regards, that people are aware there's power players that are larger than governments, and that, historical things that went on in the past have different meanings than what we thought, and maybe have more, the Bill of Rights and the Constitution and all that have more value than we realized definitely worth saving and protecting. But we'll see. It's interesting times. Mostly for me, I feel like history repeats itself, and maybe you as the individual, maybe you as the groups can try to alter it or push it in a different direction, but it's such a powerful force. It almost feels like I don't know. And I know this maybe sounds weak, but just start coming to it and living through it and just bearing witness to it rather than fight it. But I guess, even with history repeating itself, maybe there are fighters that are involved with it. I don't know. We'll see. Did you hear about where they're calling it neo-Nazi organization in Germany? It was like, I want to say it was like 400 people that were in the military organizing to assassinate all the upper leaders in Germany, politicians, when some sort of chaos broke out, and they discovered them, and they're labeling them as neo-Nazis. I can't but help wonder
if they're really maybe just like an organization that sees like what's wrong in their nation, like this will be our window. So then you just throw the label on them, neo-Nazi. Everyone knows that's evil. I was just talking about that this week because there was another story about a neo-Nazi troll farm, and I forget where they said they were out of, but they were going after some politician, and I'm just thinking, are they really a neo-Nazi, or are they really a troll farm? I mean, because I'm just hearing all this labeling, not like really any explanation of what they've actually done. They've been trolling a politician. They're neo-Nazis. They're a troll farm. I mean, those are just the key words. So it's like, oh, what if, Tokin for Tim, we're putting out all this truth, and then they're like, exactly. Today there's an article about us, 2 neo-Nazi skinheads.
Right.
And it's just like, what? That's not what we were.
Right. If anything, I'm like a libertarian liberal of like from the 90s, but
people just hear the label because there's an association, just a program response, and it's like game over. Because that's like that's the level most people operate on. They just read real quick the news headline, maybe the first paragraph, bam, keywords, and then they're talking about that. Oh, you hear about those neo-Nazi troll farm harassing? And you're just, oh yeah, I heard about that, but that's not what it was.
No, I 100% agree, and it's, God, I hate to always refer to like waking up or the red pill or whatever it is because it gets spun in different directions. But once you realize there's other power players above the government, so then stuff you read is propaganda. It's designed to manipulate and move your perception. You can't take anything on face value. And I'm sure, I get caught up into it. I get sucked into, the left-right paradigm sometimes, or if not all the time, because we're just awash in it, but something is amiss. Something is afoot, especially with the European Union. Now they want to have a European army, and they want to centralize more power because they're getting tired of, God, I forget I don't even understand the European, union in a sense of like, they don't elect officials. I don't understand it. I have to research it more. But they're doing a power grab basically to control all the member states, and they're making it difficult for anyone to leave. And I've heard tale of like, there could be war in France and in Sweden. Who knows? Everything is coming to a head and a precipice. It really is as though the 2030 agenda is on course, and I hate to think of it that way, but it feels like it. We're all being maneuvered into this point. But once again, we're talking about the same thing. I just want to survive through it. I want to figure out, what I can do to move past it.
Yeah.
Because I'm not super old yet, but it would be interesting to see what comes after. The notion is the phoenix will rise from the ashes, and what is that phoenix? Is it to the extent of the Georgia Guidestones, like what is it, 500 million, or is it just like, what we were talking about earlier, that study that came out? God, when was it? Is it early 2000s? But it showed like a large reduction of population in the U.S. by...
It wasn't even that long ago. There was a government website still up, 2011, 12, 13, somewhere in there. I used to link to it. I go back through my old blog posts.
Yeah.
But it showed that there's supposed to be this huge drop-off in the U.S. population. I can't remember exactly what year it was, but it wasn't too far off. I want to say it was 2030-something. I was like, why do they expect a big drop-off in population that year?
D'Angelo, D'Angle, I think. I just remember what it looked like in my mind. Yeah, and I've always wondered about that, and that nothing was ever denied about it. It just kind of basically disappeared from our minds, and no one cared, and it would just seem like a strange anomaly, right?
That was like 5,000 shootings ago.
Right. God, so many. It's so bizarre.
There's just something new to distract you like every week. At least 2 stories a week. Bam, bam.
But see, then I play in my mind of like, has this always been going on this way? And it's just we're more connected, so it seems more prevalent. But in some sense, it doesn't.
I think that is part of it, though.
You know,
Everybody's got the phone, the screen that's all giving them the same information. But I do think there's a quickening of tragedies being reported in the media, no doubt. Which honestly, I saw coming after September 11th. I said, well, if this lie goes unchecked, what else is going to come? They did this to instill a message and agenda, so they're going to have to reinforce that message and agenda. How are they going to do it? Now we see.
Yeah, well, and that's one of the things that also reveals about Obama, right? It isn't left or right politics, I guess, is that he didn't do anything to take away the tragedies that our government did on 9/11. I guess.
Well, he made that clear way before he was president.
Right.
If you go back and watch his 2004 Democratic keynote address, he said that people need to stop worrying about all the things that happened the last few years. That was water under the bridge, and look forward. I was like, oh, the things that have happened the last few years. Well, what would those include? Okay, we went to war on lies. I guess that's just water under the bridge. Who cares about justice? Who cares how much money it's costing? Who cares that 18-year-olds are dying over there for a lie? Water under the bridge, according to Obama. What else? Oh, 9/11? Let's not even, because, nobody's even really thinking about 9/11. But, I mean, the main thing people were thinking about back then was how we went to war on lies. And he was just telling people, it doesn't matter. And then you saw what happened. I mean, the Democrats in all those years ran on ending the war. What happened when they had the presidency, the House, the Senate? Nothing.
Well, they scaled it up.
Okay, yeah, we got to go worse.
And his FISA, was it the FISA bill, while he was still the senator, basically gave retroactive immunity to the telecom companies for warrantlessly wiretapping all of us, and like maybe 2 of them fought back.
That was before he was president.
Right,
exactly. That's why everybody hated me in Seattle, because I was telling everybody about those 2 things. What he said about the Democratic keynote address, and the fact that, because the thing was, so for people who forget, 2008, when Obama was running, the biggest political issue that year, if you were paying attention to anything, was this immunity for the telecommunication companies that had been collecting our information and essentially violating our constitutional rights. But some politicians were arguing, well, this fit into the new law changes with Patriot Act and all that. So Obama was on the campaign trail telling people that this immunity could not pass. He was a constitutional lawyer that violated our constitutional rights. He campaigned on this for months while this was going on. But then when it came time to vote, how did he vote? He voted for immunity when all these months he had said we could not do. So I just said, what more do you need to know about this guy? This guy said it violated our constitutional rights, and then he votes for it? I mean, come on. I mean, what more do you need to know? And that's not like some accident. People back then would say, well, he just got pressure on him, and he probably did that to stay in the presidential race. Now I'm just thinking, okay, first of all, if that's what he has to do to stay in the presidential race, why support him? It just shows he's a sellout and he won't stand for anything.
Right.
And the second thing is, what I was saying then is, it's just how they mock us. They do this all the time when you pay attention. They know people are just going to vote blue or red, D or R.
Right.
And it's like nothing else even matters.
Well, it's almost at this point your vote doesn't matter, and I hate to say that, but it almost doesn't. It's almost like as though it's some sort of weird, how do I want to say it, karma consent thing with the vote, right? If you think you voted, even if you lost, somehow you're still consenting to what goes on because you participated in a way.
I call it validating the lie.
Yeah, exactly. There you go. It doesn't matter. And that's last time we spoke, I guess all of our election, we were talking about the elections in Florida and how that just reveals what it is, but
did you see that today is the day that Rick Scott's confirmed for winning his election in Florida?
No.
You want to know what's so funny about it being today? So, they're having the biggest recount there since 2000 when George W. Bush became the 43rd president.
Yeah.
Today is the day leaving 43 days left in the year, and it's also the 322nd day of the year, like 322, the number at Yale Skull and Bones. And we don't normally talk Gematria on Tokin with Tim, but Yale sums to 43, so does Florida. And, Bush, 43rd president, came down to there. He went to Yale, Skull and Bones, 322nd day of the year. So to me, that's just all I'm mocking because, they voted November 6th. Now, today on a Sunday of all days, they finally got it all figured out, just supposedly on this day.
God, I wonder, even if not a mocking, there's some sort of like, I don't even want to say it, but it's almost like not magic, but some sort of inherent pattern that they've recognized that they can use to their advantage. You know
It
what I
seems
mean?
like it, like
You know, like there's something, or it there's something to it. It's hard to grasp. But then that gets me back down to, I was just thinking last night of like, more and more people feel like there's some sort of organized group or force that's pushing us in a direction, right? And I think it goes deeper than even just, the people to the east of Egypt. I think it goes even deeper than that. And
sure.
sometimes, and I'm not saying this is true, I'm just hypothesizing. So I think everyone who listens to this has to understand that, I'm just a working class person. I'm just brainstorming, hypothesizing. I'm just trying to see patterns in this world in order to predict, future events so that I know what to do, which is all very difficult to do. And I'm going on limited information. I'm just scouring the internet and, podcasts and whatever pops up to try to get my information. But sometimes I wonder, has anyone heard of toxic plasma, right? So it's that thing that infects cats and mice, and it creates this symbiotic relationship between the two. So the mouse becomes less afraid of the cat. So then it gets eaten by the mouse, and then the toxic plasma goes into the cat and then reproduces in its gut, which then comes out in the feces, which then attracts the mouse and creates this cycle. And then the cat is also affected by it. That sometimes I wonder, if like a good chunk of the population doesn't have some sort of crazy infection too, or, but anyways, who knows?
Sure, that attracts them to insanity, essentially.
Right, to do things that seem counterproductive, right? Because in my old school thinking was like, oh, how can the environment, people pollute the environment so horribly when they had to live in the same environment and when their children had to grow up in the same environment? What is going on? But anyways, it's just a crazy tangent there. It's all right,
It's okay.
But it's just odd times. My plan to survive it all is just to, little debt, grow as much food as I can, even though it may not help with 5G and all that crap coming up. Try to limit my technology usage, even though it is pretty addictive, and just be ready for when something happens. I guess I want to formulate a little bit of a plan, but the main hindrance would be my folks, what to do. But we'll see. Or one of my main worries too is, what if the value of the dollar within the next 10 years is cut to like a 1/16 of what it is? That would be scary.
If you stay where you are right now, I think you're in a better scenario than the majority of people in this world. So
yeah.
You got land to grow food.
Yeah.
And it's not crazy populated out here. So
yeah, I think it's smart that you moved out here, versus the Seattle area. The population was growing crazy over there.
Yeah, it's nuts.
It's out of control. It's miserable to drive, miserable to live. Everything becomes predatory. Everything it becomes super expensive with little fees. Restaurants start changing it where, tipping is mandatory and they just put it in the bill.
Right.
It's like, wait a minute, why not just have the correct price then? If tipping is mandatory, then make the price, whatever it is, 10% higher so that I know, versus trying to have to look for the little asterisk at the bottom that tells me that tip is included in, so that when I get my bill, there's like this 15% gratuity that, maybe the person didn't necessarily earn, and the 15% isn't necessarily cut in stone in some regards.
Right.
It's like, or whatever it's supposed to be. And don't get me wrong, I've worked in, the service industry for years and needed, tips and all that myself. But, it was the dance between the customer and the server, or the person making your food, that, was important.
It's funny. I'm just thinking about people in the workplace, and it's like everywhere you go now, everyone's got a phone in their hand and it's distracting them at all times. I even noticed that when I go out to eat, you'll see like the server man or lady, they're over at their little till, putting in the order and all that. And you're like waiting for them to do something, but then you see they're on the phone too, and you're like, come on.
Yeah. Yes, everything. It's funny you say that. I've noticed that everything's kind of being infected with the technology that workers now are allowed to have like a one earbud in. Have you noticed that
Sure,
lots
that's
of
what I
people,
mean. We're
all
just
over
like
my
hooked
work,
up.
you're allowed to have one earbud in. All the cooks were allowed to have one earbud in. You know, other places that I work, you're allowed to have one earbud in, listen to music or whatever you're listening to all the time. Would drive me nuts because people would get too involved in whatever they're listening to and not work or not be at work, you know, not communicate. We're
Ex-
definitely, weird times are coming, man. It's so strange and it's happening so quickly.
It's like humanity has never been so disconnected and connected all at once.
Yeah, yeah. We're not meant to be this way, I think. I feel like,
The technology's like overtaken common sense.
yeah, yeah, it is. It totally is. And I feel like, though, those that are implementing it are extremely smart, right? Have you heard about where, like, Facebook and Twitter, they use, like, I don't know if I'm saying it right. What is it, like, neural feedback loop kind of things where, they give you little dopamine hits of either outrage or joy or something to keep you coming back and using the apps, and then eventually it kind of learns you, so then you can't really escape it. And that was by design. It wasn't by accident. So
Not at all. I don't know the patent number off the top of my head, but somebody just passed along to me about 2 weeks ago, and I looked it up. And there's these electronic pulses that are sent through essentially computers
oh
and
yes,
phones and stuff, and they're meant to have an emotional response. So
right.
it's like subconscious. So
Okay, I was talking about something slightly different, but that's fantastic that you bring that up, because I've seen that patent thing too, where they can pulse the static electric fields or the electromagnetic fields around your devices in a way that stimulates your skin, and then through the pattern of its stimulation on your skin affects your mood and affects your behavior. God, I was thinking about that the other day too. About Wi-Fi, and if they can be doing that with Wi-Fi, because you wouldn't even
somebody has told
notice.
me, they say that they have some sort of device around their unit that's supposed to cut down on certain things but not interrupt the signal. But yeah, I know. It's like how my ear's been buzzing every single day since I
Right.
was 22 years old now.
Yeah.
Think about, so it's like almost 14. It'll be 14 years in January, or maybe 13, something like that. But it just started one day when I was working in an office. I was just typing a paper. I wasn't doing anything crazy, and all of a sudden my ear just started ringing. It's never stopped, and I'm just like, was that like the day that they tuned up the cell phone frequency, and I was just susceptible to it, or
Huh.
so.
I wonder. I wonder, because I always feel like somehow, and I hate to say this, but maybe you're in some sort of matrix, something. Like, I think, I don't want to say like the great eye is upon you, but I feel like sometimes it is. Like, there's some this,
That's what people
like,
reached out and
it's
told me, man.
swirling. There's always this swirling periphery of, like, something is about to sort of happen or something. Like, not about to happen, but like greater powers are like aware of you and just always sort of brush against you in some way. I don't know how to describe it. There's definitely odd times, you know but it's just weird times, man. And that pulsing thing, okay, so if you want to know more, there's a great YouTube video. I believe it's called Truth Stream Media, and they do a great video about that patent that pulses electromagnetic fields that stimulate your skin specifically in order to alter your mood and behavior. And that's one thing. And not only that, have you seen the other? Maybe you were thinking of the leaked document that came out. Wasn't it from a FEMA, like some FEMA office maybe? And then it was like some reporter filed some sort of request for paperwork, right? And they got this random document that showed all the different wavelengths and how they affect humans and vegetation and people, and the government knows about it. Yet we're still going ahead with this 5G crap. It's just scary times, man, and it's hard to fight back. But, like, what is it, a few times ago we were joking about how maybe we do need tinfoil hats. Maybe
Right.
that was right, ahead of its time.
Sure. Just wait till you see what we got planned for you in 30 years.
Right. Totally manipulate your behavior, or totally make you lethargic, so that even when you do realize, the pot's boiling and you're the frog in it, you can't do anything because you're totally just, who cares, or have lethargy. And it's from a variety of things, all the way from horrible food to, the electromagnetic radiation from devices and
Sure.
cell towers and things.
Sure. Exactly. It really does seem that the whole tinfoil hat joke
Yeah.
has something to do with the age we're now living in.
Yeah, that's funny you say that, huh? That it was very almost like prepping our minds. Well, we do know that, the powers that be prep years in advance and prep our minds for things that come, way in
Project
advance.
for a New American Century,
Yeah.
written at the end of the 20th century, calling for a new Pearl Harbor for the agenda for the next century. So, I mean, they might literally have this whole century planned out that we're living in right now.
Probably. I mean, because one of the biggest factors of thinking like that is 9/11. Because once people started researching 9/11, you could see where years or decades in advance they were prepping the minds of the public to accept what would happen. So once it went down, they could move straight forward with their agenda without any interruption.
So maybe they're planned out even more than a century.
It makes me wonder, and that's what people are saying, hypothesize with all the school shootings and stuff. It's used to push your mind in a certain direction.
All the young people. Think about the young people.
Right.
Because they're going so hard right now, and there's no sign that anything's going to change in the immediate moment. But what about once all these children that are coming up in the system right now, that every single day at their schools,
Right.
they're preparing daily for active shooter drills, and they're having all sorts of lockdowns because a report comes from a police station that there's an armed man in the... This is happening all over the nation every single day. So right now, even like if you don't hear about a school shooting, probably like almost every single school district is experiencing something like this each year. And so all these young children are just learning like,
Some little
comes a
dog.
dog. Where'd he come from?
He probably lives here.
Yeah, but it's just like they're conditioning all the young people. It's going to be the young people that further take away their liberties because they're being programmed right now.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. And it kind of fits the timeline, of like in the middle of the 2020s somewhere, a certain of age of people. I wonder what generation. I'm trying to think of when it's like maybe early 20s might be a generation that could take over. So then let's say 25. So what is it? We're 5, 6, 7, say 7 years. So they're only maybe 18, 17, 18. They're just coming into power of their own in some regards. Well, who knows? I don't know. All I know is I can feel something is coming up. It's the pendulum swinging, right? That's what I've always thought Trump is that he's put there to create a fervent swing of the pendulum, so then, and also to, in our minds, kind of open up the possibility of what we perceive as a leader, right? Before we had more, that's why people kind of felt safer with Obama, because he was still classically statesman-like, right? Like he spoke kind of like a statesman. He went through the traditional ways, wasn't he? Like a senator. And anyways, there's was more traditions associated with him. Where Trump has kind of broken that barrier, and by breaking that barrier, it's I think it's going to allow for someone that will do kind of dastardly things, the next president or two, so maybe if Trump wins again in 2020, and then who's going to win it? Is it 2024? That's the president I'm mostly worried about. I think that will be the last president in a way. Well, isn't all the weird predictions that Trump is the last American president or something?
People thought that about Obama too.
Yeah, that's true. I just think of it that way because of the way, people's minds work. They're being swung so hard right or so hard left, and that's mostly what I worry about. Because then what's going to happen? It's going to be everything's set up for some sort of dictatorship in this country through presidential signing statements coming out of 9/11 with George Bush and Jr. did tons of presidential signing statements so that if there's any sort of what do I want to say it, large terrorist act in the United States, the president has crazy powers to seize properties, form work camps. It's crazy, and everything's codified into law. It's just a matter of who's going to pull the trigger to do all this. But then, I guess it's more dynamic than that in the sense of like, what would our troops do? What are the troops going to do? And so then you get to the other ideas of like, maybe they are trying to form a way to get a lot of UN troops in here. So it isn't going to be our troops against us. It'll be, troops from other parts of the world against its own us, the people of the United States.
And it very well could be that way. We've seen these nations having these army trainings together and whatnot. So
yeah, but see that I guess everything hangs upon the U.S. Army in some regards, the U.S. military. Like, if something changes, where do their loyalty lie? Because we're powerful only in the sense of our organization and making it happen, but
that's the only way to overthrow. That's really the only way to overthrow what's upon us, is to get somehow the military.
But see,
to go against his master.
But see there, that I worry about trains of thought like that, right? Because then it's like those that rule us in a way, maybe they don't care which choice you have. You're given the choice, right? Like, you can go along with what it is. Okay, now if you fight back and use the military, but then they're going to co-opt the military in some way. So now you've just asked for your own military dictatorship in a way. Do you see what I'm saying? Like,
sure.
I can see where they can play all lines, all
avenues. Oh yeah, I see what you're saying.
I fear.
I'm just saying, if you could get the military to stand down and not defend these people,
right? No, I 100% agree.
That was my thought. But yeah, I see what you're saying. Then you don't want the military to fully take over, and then have your military dictatorship just front and center and knowing.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. That's why the solutions to what we're in is just really difficult at this point. It's hard to know the answers, and mostly I believe one of the major things is technology, right? I can see where the Civil War back in the day was more doable because you could go hide out in the woods, you could form little cells, and it could work, and you weren't swarmed with Wi-Fi and
drones and just everything that there is.
Right, and I'm sure that if you wanted to change things, you could figure out some stuff, but it's going to be extremely difficult. And for whoever out there's listening, the powers that be, we're just hypothesizing, we're just brainstorming, we're not, and I'm just saying this to cover our asses, we're not saying to go do anything violent, don't do any of that, we're trying to figure out solutions that aren't involved in that,
So you don't think we should join Antifa?
No, their dummies are the tools of the government in some regards, right? So
have you ever looked into how to join Antifa?
No, but I've seen where someone's like found their handbook and read it, and like a 30-minute video on their handbook. It's hilarious.
It just makes me think of ISIS in a way, about how ISIS was getting all these teenagers getting recruited by ISIS. But I had to just investigate to see if I could figure out how to join ISIS. It's pretty much impossible. It's not like there's any website for. I guess ISIS has a Twitter, which is funny, but
ISIS. But I don't know if it's safe to say, but my impression, ISIS was the country east of Egypt and the United States together.
That's my interpretation too. But
little proxy army in Syria.
Yeah, I'm just saying that when they were saying that all these teenagers were like signing up for ISIS through the web, I was like, well, where's the sign up at? I got to look into this, and I could not find it anywhere.
No, that's a way of the U.S. and that country to get involved in a war without actually saying they're involved in that war. Right? They just say, oh, it's this, and then every so often they need $760 billion extra dollars to something, and then there you go. That's how everything's getting funded.
Right. I remember when they first were starting to break the propaganda about ISIS, they reported that they minted their own currency. They had their own air force. I was like, wait a minute, this sounds like a nation.
Right. That's what I think. That's how they're trying to fear it. It's like some Islamic nation rising up or something.
Because I know there's a nation over there that we pay for their entire air force. So.
Oh yeah, it's It's all stupid. Everything involved in the Middle East is stupid. I mean, if we were really smart and we'd try to get away from the oil from the Saudis, we'd disentangle ourselves from, other countries there. We'd become more self-sustaining of our own. That's why I'm more nationalist of anything. Is America has a lot of potential. It is amazing, and for me, of course, I like to grow plants and food, so I always think of farming. You have the cold north and the warm south. You have the ability to produce food all year round. You have the geothermal of this, of Montana, that really, if we wanted to figure out how to harness that and generate electricity and power from it, when there's a will, there's a way, but there's no will, so nothing gets done. But we still have these options within the country.
That's what I mean. So if it was a community that wasn't about profit and power and was just about sustainability and being happy and healthy,
Yeah.
you could pursue all these things at this day and age.
Or even use the strongest assets of Americans, in my opinion, is our ingenuity and our creativity.
Right.
And maybe that's even if that's spawning from our sort of capitalism, it is pretty amazing, what we can do as a people, and that needs to be harnessed over the easy ideas of just like, our old foreign policies and the way we go about things now. But, I don't know. How do we reorganize ourselves? How do we make that happen? How do we become a rising phoenix out of these ashes? I don't know. That's the hard part. But maybe that's what I kind of like about now too, is everyone is kind of having to push to think about what they believe and know to be true and how things manifest. And maybe that's a good thing. Maybe we're really having to now, as a people and as a culture, really challenge some of the ideas that we hold, and
right.
Some of it seems scary. I mean, if you get caught in the left-right paradigm, it can be very scary, but it's just weird times. I don't know if it's always been like this, but I don't think it has. Technology seems to like amp everything up and make it more doable, comparable to the past,
Right. Times have definitely changed from our parents and grandparents to now. So
that's what I worry about too, is we're definitely reaching a paradox point where, those who knew how to live off the land and survive are going to be gone, and it's only going to be people dependent on technology that know how to, they survive with technology, not without. So then if that technology is ever removed or there's an interruption, it can be dangerous. But, maybe that's the breaking point we're being pushed towards, as a species, or maybe even culture, just Western culture versus others. I mean, humanity will go on. It'll be the tribes in the Amazon or something, or
sure.
Maybe even the Amish that we spoke about earlier.
Yeah.
It's definitely a culling. Something is afoot. But, I don't know. Just try to plug forward, still plan for retirement, I guess. Because what if something doesn't happen, and then you'll be like, oh, shit, man.
I got to go on.
Yeah, I got to keep moving forward. So plan to keep moving forward, but, just be cautious.
While looking for the avenue to overthrow the Matrix.
Right. That's why part of getting out and doing these hikes is that, just to enjoy what is right now. We have the luxury to do this. It's beautiful out.
We could say, oh, the air is toxic, so I'm staying inside, but in 15 years, it might be way more toxic. And you're like, damn, I wish I went out 15 years ago when it was less toxic.
Right. We just got to do it now. Capitalize on the now, what's good and what's beautiful, maximize our lives as much as we can, in the easiest ways. Try to make it happen.
What do you think about all the people who think of the contrails, everything being contrails, like our white washed out sky everywhere today due to the spray? You think they just forgot what the blue sky used to look like?
Maybe. I think that's definitely a phenomena of where
this has become normal.
Right. It's the notion of memory, right? Which is that how do I describe it? Technology in a way is replacing our memories of stuff, memories of things, and then as the older generations pass away that had memories prior to the computers and the information age, the new it's the new normal effect. Then this is what's normal then, and because this is how it's always been. And then if you look to the internet for information and stuff, it'll just say this is what it has always been, versus people that actually remember what it was like prior to now. And as generations pass, they'll be able to, I think, or as generations go on, should I say, that they'll be able to do this with greater strength, meaning that they'll be able to define what is the new normal quicker, and people will just accept it because they'll just use the tools of the state to verify the facts that they're trying to prove. And I think part of me thinks that's what the Mandela effect is, if you've heard about that, is to convince you your mind is not, you aren't accurately remembering things, and that it's you who have the problem. It's not that history and events and things are being changed, in order to cover up stuff.
Mass confusion,
exactly.
The X-Files on Fox even did an episode on the Mandela effect, and I forget how they laid out, but I think some government official comes out in the end and says, yep, it's all to create mass confusion so people don't know what's up and what's down.
Right, and then, get the populace to argue amongst each other, right? So how am I supposed to educate, my sister's son in 15 years when he's in his 20s about 9/11? You'll just go pull up the video, and when I said, oh, man, did you see this video about that? Or, here are these pictures or this evidence. He'll pull it up. It'll be completely different. And he'll be like, what are you talking about? I can see it for myself right here. It's not what you said it is. You're just not remembering it accurately.
Right.
And then...
It happens all the time. It's like for years I was able to show people about the 77 ritual with the Pentagon on September 11th. And about 3 months ago, Wikipedia changed the height of the Pentagon. But if you read the actual Wikipedia article, it still has the right height. But when you do like a quick web search, if you just type in how tall is the Pentagon, which people just do, now it has a new height. So now I'm getting all these comments saying, I thought you said the Pentagon was this tall. It says it's this tall. And the only source in the world that says that is the Wikipedia quick splash page.
Yep.
So it just shows you how many people, that's the level of research they do.
Right.
They're like, oh, I just searched into Google and it has this, so you're wrong. It's like, do a little more research and see if I'm wrong.
Right. So. That's the exact effect that I'm describing, is that exact effect that, the history and facts are being changed to suit the narrative, the common narrative. And that's what's scary. See what I mean? It's tough to be able to fight back or to push back, because to even recruit people to think like you, to be on one side to push back, is going to be extremely difficult. No one will be able to have the correct facts or the correct interpretation of what's going on.
Right, and not the intelligence or the critical thinking to... it's like there's so many layers that we have to compete with trying to wake people up to the truth. I mean, on one hand, we live in the idiocracy pretty much.
Right. Well, yeah, part of me is almost given up. I almost consider it like a drug addict, meaning that people have to wake themselves up. They have to do their own thing. I don't know why they didn't want to hike. They could have stopped and pulled in behind us.
I think what they think is we're leaving and they want our parking spot.
Yeah, but there's still plenty of parking for a car.
Yeah, they could have been more clever.
But it's all kinds of weird forces we're fighting. Everything's coming from all directions. It's like a multiple front war against the people. And it's just, it almost hurts your head in a way to wrap your mind around all of it. That's why sometimes I feel like it's almost... It's beyond human in a way, but...
This technology that we have seems beyond human, honestly.
Well, I mean, even just the organization, right? The full-on assault in many different directions of what's happening to the public.
Now that the technology is in place, it seems to make it easy.
Yeah.
Just get our message out through the TV, set up these satellites, these signals, it goes all over the world. You got everybody under your thumb.
It just amazes me, and that the plans go on for so long. I just wonder. Sometimes I wonder, like, have you... I read this book a long time ago. I don't know if I actually remember the premise of all of it accurately, but it was Clan of the Cave Bear. And it was like this one woman was different than the other cavemen, and she was like I guess now she may have been from a different tribe, but my impression when I read the book as a young kid was like she was like like an evolutionary change in the line, and they were, it was just out of all this other cavemen, suddenly this one girl was born different, and then she's able to do things or interpret things slightly different from the others. And so sometimes I wonder about that, if like something like that hasn't already happened, right? And we, as the common people, aren't necessarily aware that that's necessarily happened. And there are people that are, I don't want to say necessarily smarter. Maybe it is smarter. Maybe they've always been there.
You know what? Honestly, from just being in this community so long, it doesn't seem like it's an intelligence thing. It just seems like it's an all sort. It's like even some dumber people are like more awake and see the obvious lies.
Yeah.
It's like a certain quality trait in humanity. And if you read all the pretty much spiritual texts in the world, they all hint at this fact that like only so many people are awake or have a sense of truth. And yeah, it does just make you wonder why it is that way and why it's been this way for so long. So,
and I don't know. I just worry for the future of the children. They'll grow up to be adults in this system where they'll have to try to overcome tyranny and authoritarianism.
Maybe only for very few. Maybe only for the ones that have the trait, which seems maybe if it's on the decline. I don't know.
Oh, that's a good point. People will be under the thumb of tyranny and won't even know it. They'll just think this is what it is, and it has always been, which is quite funny too, because I wanted to do a review of or a comparison of like pre-Bolshevik revolution and the leap forward Maoist communism, to see the connections of now what's going on in our country or our social scene compared to what it was going then. And when you look at communism, there's actually we have a lot of similarities already. We've moved way past the vision of what people wanted America to be historically. The free individual, free thinking individual, that free thinking independent thought part is difficult, and that's sort of vanished from our society. It's more easy just to go with the flow and go with what the government and the state says.
Sure. Everybody, I mean, what you see in the mainstream, from news to sitcoms to movies, is constant reinforcement of making fun of people such as ourselves and being labeled with these things that have negative associations. I actually just turned on Bill Maher this Friday night, his final episode of his season, just to see what he's going to say closing out. And he began his show making fun of people online, blaming the California fires on Freemason raccoons. That was his quote.
What? Freemason raccoons?
And then everybody laughs. And I was thinking, I feel like he's watching my videos, because I'm showing. Did you see the Masonic fire recently in California?
No. What? No.
There was a big fire in Redding. It was called the Masonic fire.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, it was just before all these other bigger fires, just before it. So anyway, I did a pretty long presentation just showing the history of the fires in California and the Masonic rituals that are behind them, and how this Masonic fire synced up with the other ones. So anyway, just watching Bill Maher open that this week, I was like, not many people online are talking about Freemasonry and the fires in California.
Right.
And so I was like, I've done plenty of videos exposing Bill Maher, so maybe he knows about my work. But yeah, I just thought, and I just listened to everybody laugh at that. And I was just imagining going on his show, just like if I actually got to talk to him, just what it would be like. He'd just be cutting me off and making jokes and the whole, and that's how it'd be. So it's like I wouldn't be able to get in a word. The presentation would be, oh, these people are laughing at his dumb jokes, like, oh, what are you blaming on Freemason raccoons?
Right.
Like, no, I didn't say Freemason raccoons.
Or that none of it, I mean, let's not even go like do weapons, right? Direct energy weapons. Just think of like it feels suspicious with the connections with the power companies.
Oh, of course,
the rail connections, housing prices. Everything seems incredibly suspicious.
There's actually a video on YouTube. I wish I remember the name of the woman. She uploaded it in February of this year.
Yeah.
And she said how they had plans to burn down that Paradise, California. And she was explaining the agenda and getting people to move out of the rural communities back into the cities.
Right, yeah.
She spelled all this out and said what was coming for that Paradise, California in February of this year. She laid it all out. And I think stuff like that's going to end up waking up more people. But how many people are actually going to go out and look for that information is the problem.
Right. And as everything, most people's, not most, but a lot of people's minds are conditioned not to take what the truth is. It's a conspiracy. Everything is just random. There's no hidden hand behind anything. There's no powers above government. No one in government. Everyone in government is like, some of my relatives will be like, oh, is government corrupt? Oh yeah. So there's got to be conspiracies. Nope, conspiracy theories are crazy. I'm like, wait, isn't that government
That's
corruption?
pretty much how everyone thinks in America too, which
Yeah.
is so weird. It's like you don't understand the words you're using, or you're not really. It's like was it you that used the NPC term?
Maybe it's going around now.
Well, yeah, it's like
It
these
does
people.
seem NPC.
It's like these people just have program responses that don't make sense. Because yeah, almost everyone in America will say the government's corrupt, and it's like money in politics. When you talk about conspiracy, they're like, "Oh, I don't talk about conspiracies." It's like, okay, so what do you call it when government's corrupt because there's money and things aren't? And then they don't have like a response.
Right.
Like, that's just the way the world works. So the world works on a conspiracy.
Right, exactly. It almost seems more the norm, at least in our country at this point in time, than the exception. Especially if you think the government basically just has money printed up to do whatever. There's no real budget in a sense, nothing to constrain them. All you have to do is get in there and figure out a way to get the money to flow in your direction, and then there you go, man. That's classic bureaucracy, and those big upper bureaucracies, right? They actually battle each other for parts of budgets and money, and they have to figure out ways to justify to get more money to come into their part of their bureaucracy, and then figure out ways to make bonuses and things off of it. Because there's just basically an infinite pool. There's no check. It's not like the government has a budget and at some point they said, they're past their budget, so stop spending, and that's that for the year. That never happens.
Infinite lending, infinite debt.
Exactly, and that totally lends itself to corruption. I mean, come on, man.
It should make you go, well, wait a minute. So, like, what's actually fueling this system? If you start to look at it, you're like, it's just a control system.
Yeah.
It's a control system, and it's all based on our participation in it.
Yeah.
So that's like, that's the way to end it, to get people to stop participating in the system. If 10 million people agreed to not pay their taxes, the government would be up Schitt's Creek without a paddle, because they can't regulate 10 million people. And if 10 million people did that, and that people saw like, oh, wait a minute, they're not paying their taxes and get away with it, maybe I'm going to join that pool.
Right. Or maybe your taxes aren't getting anything that you necessarily want. I mean, some of it, we do have roads and things.
But you know what? Somewhat. Let's look at Saudi Arabia. They don't pay any taxes. They got better roads than us.
Right. Well, yeah, that's a good point.
So we're not getting anything in the way we're taxed. Other countries that pay comparable tax rates, look at everything that they get. They get like all of their education paid for. Here in the U.S., everybody's super in debt from education. They get their health care paid for. If you're not in debt from education, you're in debt from health care. And what else do they get? Like women get maternity leave paid for by the government. So people will say, oh, I don't want that. That's communism, socialism. But it's like, well, wait a minute. We're already paying the same amount of taxes. If we're going to pay that rate of taxes, why don't we ask for the same efficiency and effectiveness from our government?
Right. It's not even close. It just goes to the military-industrial complex.
Right.
It just gets sucked away and
overpriced stuff. But the people who hate all of they'll go, oh, that's what those Europe socialists do. It's like, okay, I get it. I don't exactly want to pay other people's bills too. I'd like to live in a society that's like sustainable and smart and intelligent. So like, if I knew that, like, let's just say, it's not possible. So we're talking in an impossible scenario. But if I knew that government, wasn't really so much about corruption, was more about building a good society, educated, healthy people, then I'd be like, okay, I can contribute to this. I'm happy to pay my share to make sure this functions. But there's just no evidence that we get that in the U.S. We get a dysfunctional society, an unhealthy society, a toxic society, pretty much.
Right.
At a high cost.
I 100% agree. I have no problem paying in, but it's to total corruption at this point. If it weren't, it would be perfect. But I think that's the whole notion of the technocratic part of of people now, is to reduce population and control it through science and statistics,
and steal from us. Like,
oh yeah,
and it's like we're being used. That's what people have to see.
Yeah,
it's a mass.
No, I 100% agree.
Yeah.
And once again, it's just about how do you fight that system, and the best I can do is just fight it on little ways every day. But it's tough because you have to be disciplined. You have to think about everything you do in some regards.
Sure. Yeah, I know, man. It's hard because almost everything, That's the other thing they've done to us by introducing things like Waco to us and other situations.
Right.
They said, here's the people who tried to resist the government and
Right,
create
good
their own
point.
community. Look how this ended up.
Right. No, good point.
So,
All right, man. Should we go for this walk?
all right. Let's wrap it up. Until next time, Tokin with 10.